Candice with Grow Local, and today we are going to start by talking about tomatoes. We have had a lovely, cool spring, so things like your peas and your carrots and your garlic, they're all doing just great. Tomatoes, they've been a little iffy getting them in the ground, but we just had that real good heat burst and everything's pretty well warmed up. I know it's a little on the cooler side today, but if you've been stalling out on doing the tomatoes and now you think it's too late, it's not, you guys. It really isn't. A lot of the farmers markets still have the tomatoes and the starters that you can put in the ground. Some of the garden centers have got them on sale already, so you can try that too. And they come in. They've got a really good start for them. I've already dug a hole in here. I'm going to put my stake in, my old bamboo stake, because I want it in before I put the tomato in, because I don't want it to ruin any of the roots. And the one I've got here is stuck in my carrots. It is the Black Prince, and it's an indeterminate, which means that it is going to keep on growing as long as the temperatures are good, you're watering it, you're taking care of it, it's going to keep on growing. A lot of these indeterminate tomatoes can get anywhere from 6 to 20 feet. It's ridiculous how tall they can get. I don't ever let them get that tall. Anyway, I've got it. It's in the pot. I'm going to try to set it into the ground. I've already pre-dug my hole. I'm hoping it's going to go to about there. And with that, I am going to take off the suckers and the bottom leaves. With your tomatoes, if you can, prune off the bottom leaves. You don't want them touching the ground. Whenever you water, you get the splashback, and that can cause some diseases like blight, and you don't need that on your tomatoes. So, a little bit on the tricky side here. Squeeze my pot. I didn't prep this. I figured I'd give you hands on it, how awkward it can be. And there we go. And it's got good roots. Make sure you're holding it fairly high up, otherwise it's going to bend the stem. In it goes. And I want it closer to that stick, so I'm going to turn it around a bit. And there we go, that should do me. And then I'm just going to bury it again. And if you noticed, I got my gardening gloves and I never remember to use them. Top it up. I have a little bit of worm castings. I'm going to sprinkle that on the top, only because I've got lots of worm castings this year, and it's good for the soil. It's good fertilizer. Gives it an extra boost. I've got my nasturtiums are growing crazy here. They're weaving their way right through everything, and that suits me just fine. And then use a soft tie to give your tomatoes some support. I've got my good old Velcro. You can use cut up t-shirts. You can use anything, you guys, as long as it's soft. You don't want a really hard string, and you don't want to do it too tight. You want a little bit of mobility, a little bit of flexibility. Otherwise it cuts into the stem, and that's not good for your plant. Now, that's going to do me just fine for now. And then I've got some more Velcro that I'm just going to slide down so I know where it is when I need it. That was that. That's all there is to it. I'll give it a real good drink of water. They have all these little hairs going up and down the stems, and all those little hairs are going to turn into new roots. So I'm going to have some really good support. I've already got blossoms on it. And if it's windy like this, easy peasy. If it's a quiet day, walk by your tomatoes and give them just a little shake. They are self-fertilizing, and when you do that, you're just shaking up the pollen and you're going to get your tomatoes faster. If you have run out of space, which is what this is starting to look like, because I've got so much stuff in here, you guys, and I'm so excited. But I ran out of pots. So Here's my bag of soil. And I'm just going to punch a couple of holes in the bottom of the bag. They have determined that you want to have the holes more towards the bottom of the bag, not the sides, because you get better drainage that way. It's not a full bag, it's my leftovers. And I'm going to plant another tomato in here, and it is going to do just fine. Barring the weather, of course. So I'll just roll this down. It's a good way of recycling. I mean, if you've added stuff to your garden or you've got bags hanging around, this works really well, you guys. So I have this tomato, and this is a midnight snacker tomato, and it's already got a little bit of fruit on it. So I'm getting kind of excited. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about is suckers. So before I put this in the bag, we did post something like this on the website, so if you want to go to Grow Local, you can actually check it out. It's explained really well, not by me, by somebody else, and it's brilliant. But anyway, these are suckers. You've got a branch growing out, and then you've got another piece of plant coming out, and you can just break it off. You can leave these on. What they're going to do is they're just going to turn into a nice big stem, and it's going to fruit, and you're going to get lots of fruit. But sometimes your tomato just gets too bushy that way, it gets too heavy, you get lots of fruit, but you have a better chance of having low air circulation and ending up with leaf blight. So I'm just going to snip off some stuff here. There they are. I don't know if you garden like I do, but I'm forever dropping stuff. Where did I put it? And you can clean off anything that is below where the fruit is. It's not going to hurt it at all. My pruners are biting it. The little clip's gone, so every time I put them down like that, they won't close. So that's garbage going into the compost bin. And you can see I've just pinched them off like that, and I'm going to pinch that branch off too. So I've stripped it down. In this case, you do get to watch me make a hole. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And look at the roots on that one. That's good. Give them a bit of a tickle so they know they don't have to grow in a straight line. Tuck it in the pot. And she's good to go. I do need to put a stake in there, and I will. I actually grabbed one, but I don't know where I've put it, so I'll do that later. But that's all there is to that. They will talk about pruning suckers up towards the top of your plant. This is something to be aware of, you guys. As it goes up, if you haven't pruned these out, sometimes they get, at the top, they get really big, and you can't tell which is the main stem and which is the sucker anymore. So they'll tell you, if you're not sure, leave it alone. It just means you're going to have two main branches, and then you can continue to pull the suckers out of those ones. But anything down low, feel free to take the suckers off of. Once you've taken the suckers, you can either just put them in water like this and leave them for about a week or two, and then they are going to have roots and you can pot them up. Or you can just take the whole thing, take your little sucker, pot it right up, firm that soil in, and then put it in a little dish that's going to have some water in it so that it stays consistently moist. You don't want it soaking, well, I guess it doesn't matter if it's soaking wet, you're putting it in a jar of water otherwise. But again, after a week or so, you're going to start getting roots. Once you see a little more new growth coming off, you can pop it in the ground. This works out really, really well at the beginning of the season. If you can get a fair-sized plant, you put it in the ground and then start taking your suckers off. So you've paid for one plant and you can end up with a whole row for the same price. They're going to be a little bit behind, but not enough to make any difference. So that's it for the tomatoes, planting them and how to utilize the suckers. After that, you guys, just make sure that with your tomatoes, you keep them consistently moist. If you don't, you run into what's called blossom end rot. That's a calcium deficiency, and a lot of times that's because it hasn't had a sufficient or consistent water uptake. You can get, what's the other one? Blossom end rot. Cat facing. There's cat facing too. That's usually at the beginning of the season, your first tomatoes, and they think it has more to do with temperature than anything. Your tomatoes kind of come out deformed. They've got kind of scars and scabs. They're totally edible. They're just a pain to try to cut so that you're not eating that part. And they're kind of neat. Some people they just are funky and they'll grow them just because they're curious. They're just because they're a curiosity. But other than that, and that's the other thing I was trying to think of. When you keep them well watered and that's going to be my cutoff part. And when you are watering, just make sure that it's consistent. If it's not consistent, if your tomato doesn't have a good water uptake, then you can run into the problem of blossom end rot. Usually that means they don't get enough calcium, and that has to do with the amount of water that goes up. You can also get splitting or cracking, and that's because if it runs out of water, the tomato toughens its skin up so that it can conserve water. And then the next time you give it a real good soaking, it gets a whole lot and it splits. Totally edible, totally fine, but that's one of the reasons behind it. And that's about all I can think of for now. Okay, thanks. Hi, it's Candice with Grow Local. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about fertilizers. And honestly, you guys, this is such a rabbit hole to go down. You can go absolutely insane with all the different things that you can use for fertilizing your plants and your garden. And you'll get so overwhelmed that you'll go, oh, forget it. Just don't want to do this anymore. So I just want to see if I can simplify it a little bit for you. When you go to get fertilizer, if it's truly organic, which is the kind that we want you to try to use is organic, it's better for the soil, it's better for the environment, it's a much slower acting type of fertilizer, so it's not going to leach out and get into our groundwater and cause potential problems anywhere else. So, promoting organic, it has to say OMRI on it if it's truly organic, and that stands for the Organic Materials Research Institute. And if it doesn't say that on it, then it's not classified as pure organic. Don't get really in a twist about that, because the rules for that are so tight that if you want to claim that your chicken manure is completely organic, you actually have to let them know what those chickens ate, and sometimes that's just not feasible. So you can have an organic product, but it's just not certified, okay? So don't get too anxious over it. When you pick it up, you're going to find 3 numbers on the box as a rule. I'm going to show you this one, and it says, this is a specialty fertilizer for potatoes. I just grabbed it just to show you guys what it's about. It has 6-20-20. The first number is always going to be nitrogen. That's for your green leafy growth, okay? With potato, it's got a 6. Because seriously, do you want lots and lots of green leaves on a potato? No, you want the tubers, you want potatoes. So the middle number is your phosphorus, and that's the number that gets you lots of good strong roots. It gets you your seeds, your flowers, your fruits. So that's the middle one. And the third number is potassium. And that one, you guys, is for the plant's overall health. It helps for the water uptake, the nutrient uptake, and it helps prevent disease with your plants. It just helps keep them stronger, okay? So for a potato, you want 6-20-20 because you want lots of tubers and you want a good uptake of water and nutrients. This is what it looks like out of the box. It's just a granular. Also, when you're using these and putting them in your garden, please wear gloves. Some people have reactions to the different things in the products. And some of them are very, very dusty. And although they're not really harmful, breathing it in is a whole different effect on your lungs. And if you get it in your eyes, it's going to drive you crazy too. So always take care when you're adding fertilizers. Anyway, this is a granular one. So you would mix it in with the soil prior to the top 4 inches of soil prior to planting your potatoes. And then you'd water it in really well. And then maybe about a month or month and a half down the road, you would do what they call side dress. And that's where you go beside your potatoes and you would make a little row and you would apply the fertilizer and then just cover it up with an inch or 2 of soil and water it in. Easy peasy. So if you've got your potatoes in and you don't have potato fertilizer and you think you want to try it, you can still side dress. This one is a bone meal. Now it's really high in phosphorus. The numbers 4, 10, 0, which means you're going to get some green growth, but you're going to get a lot stronger bulbs, roots, flowers, but it doesn't really have anything in there that's going to help the plant protect itself against disease. But it is really handy to put in. Typically, bone meal takes about 3 months before it can break down enough in the soil to actually be good for your plants. It looks like this, and it's actually quite stinky, you guys. But again, that's another one. Wear a mask, eye protection, gloves. And this is a product, I hadn't seen this one before, but this is pelleted chicken manure. Now chicken manure is really, really good to add to your garden. It's a good overall fertilizer, and it also helps your soil. It helps the tilth in it. It adds more benefits. Pelleted just means they've taken out about 76% of the moisture, so it's a lot easier to work with. And these ones, some of them have got some extra additives in it. Chicken manure has calcium in it, so it's really good for your tomatoes. This one is a seaweed extract. Now you can get seaweed granular or you can get it in the liquids. And it's a 1, 2, and a 5, which means it's going to really help your plants for disease resistance, okay? And if there's things like green sand that you can add, but it's a non-renewable resource. Which is why they say use your seaweed. It works just as well. Sometimes it acts a little faster than what your green sand would. You can get your phosphates, your rock phosphates and stuff. So like I said, there's all kinds of different things that you can get to put in your soils. And if you get overwhelmed, go find a brand like this one. Not the only end-all be-all that's out there, but this one has everything already mixed and it's all in the right proportions, and it's a 4-4-4, so it's going to be a real general purpose. You're going to get enough for green growth, you're going to get enough for your fruits and roots, and you're going to get enough for the overall health, okay? Also, you will find if you're looking at synthetic as opposed to organic, the numbers on synthetics are a lot higher. You're going to find, instead of a 4-4-4, you might find a 20-20-20. They're still going to work the same. These just take a little bit longer to break down, but they are much more, they're just better for the environment. The plants can utilize them a little easier. And it's a good thing. If you really want to get into it, if you've just got a home garden, I would just stick with these easy peasy guys. But if you have a large garden or a market-sized garden, you might want to just do a soil test first, just to find out what you actually do need. And this is an excellent book for telling you all about the different things. It was fun reading it because he's one of those guys that he was really naive when he started, and he knew he had to fertilize his crops. And that's when the fertilizer from the big companies were coming out, and everybody was going, well, you got to use this, and you got to use that, and you got to use this. And he went on a site and they said, nitrogen is nitrogen is nitrogen. Phosphorus is phosphorus is phosphorus. Doesn't matter where it comes from, it all works the same. So he went, oh great, because there were farmers that had horses in the area, and they were saying to people, come and get it. it's free. I'll deliver it if you want to take it. So he did. And then there were just a bunch of things, options for him like that, and he really utilized it, and it worked out really, really well for him. And he said that the old farmers were coming to him because he's the new kid on the block. How come your gardens are so great? How come your stuff is so lush? How come you're not having any of these pest problems? And he said, well, I don't know, I just use this. So it just shows you that organic can be the way to go. And I just really like the book. And anyway, you guys, that's about it. I hope I didn't, oh, you know what? I did forget. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Also, with those numbers, the 6-20-20, that refers to the volume. So it's 6% volume, 20% volume, 20% volume in this box. The rest of it are other smaller amounts of nutrients and filler. Okay, so that's what that means. It's just the percentage that you're going to get in the container. With the local manures or the local fertilizers, if you can get your hands on them, there is horse manure, but please make sure that it's been well rotted, composted for at least a year. Horses munch on all sorts of vegetation, but they only have one stomach, so a lot of times you'll get seeds from it. And if you put fresh manure on your gardens, a lot of times the ammonia in it is so strong that you're going to burn your plants. So make sure it's well composted. Cow manure, maybe 6 months of composting, you get a much lower chance of having seeds in it because they've got, what, 5 stomachs? So that stuff gets worked out pretty good by the time it comes out the productive end. And then there is sheep manure. Apparently that is absolutely dynamite for your gardens. My favorite is rabbit poop. You can get rabbit poop. If you've got neighbors that have got pet rabbits, get the remains. I mean, this stuff is absolutely brilliant, and it's one of the few manures that you can actually add into your garden right away. It's not going to burn, and it's got all sorts of nutrients in it. And one of the other things is something called worm castings, and I know everybody's probably heard of worm castings. Kids call it worm poop. It's absolutely lovely. It's produced all over the place from worms. It's really light, it's really fluffy. A really good idea if you're planting transplants is to dig the hole, put in a handful of your worm castings and maybe a little bit of 4-4-4 fertilizer, mix it up, and then pop in your transplant and you're good to go. Other than that, there are also a couple of books that I thought you might be interested in, as well as Elliot Coleman's New Organic Grower. But these are 2 that are done by Linda Gilkinson. They're older ones. I don't actually know if she's got any new ones in. But with the way the climate's changing, it's really, really good. She's got the resilient garden. So she's talking about the higher temperatures, less rain, more rain, all these different things that we're having to deal with that we never had to deal with before. And this one is a lot on garlic diseases. She's got a pest update in there, how to have a pollinator garden. Lots of brilliant information in these 2 books too. So, having said that, I hope you guys have a good summer growing. Hey, it's Candice with Grow Local, and right now we're going to talk about some pots. Different pots for different things, different situations, but it's kind of nice to know what kind of pots you want to use for what you're going to be growing. These are your terracotta pots. They come in a whole lot of different sizes, different styles. Some of them are really pretty and intricate. Some are just really plain Jane. They're really good when you are growing things that don't like to stay wet, because terracotta is clay and it is really, really porous. Downside of these is that if we have a lot of wet weather and cold weather, which we do, you get that expansion contraction, and they do have a tendency to break. But if it's in a sheltered spot, these things can last you for years. And if you look around, some pot companies have actually started adding certain chemicals to make their terracotta pots more frost proof. Which is kind of exciting. They are a little bit on the heavier side, but like I said, they are really good for growing things like your rosemary and your oregano, cactus and succulents, because sometimes you want to have kind of an edible looking garden. These ones are going to be your ceramic. So they're still fairly porous, but they usually have a finish on the outside that holds more of the moisture in, so they have less of a tendency to crack. But again, when you're purchasing them, they will usually say they're frost resistant, not frost proof. So they will last you for several years. If you know that we're going to have a whole lot of rain followed by a cold spell or cold snap, try to keep your heavier pots on caddies, because you should actually move them into a sheltered spot closer to the house or something. Otherwise, you're going to find that expansion and contraction and your pots will crack. But again, you should get years out of these things. Next up, plastic pots. Really good for things that need to retain moisture. They're a lot lighter. So if you're growing on a deck or a balcony and weight's going to be an issue, these are really good. You can find plastic pots now that actually come with a guarantee that they're not going to get brittle and they're not going to sun fade for up to 10 years, which is really kind of nice. And like I said, they're so good for so many things, and they come in so many different colors and styles. These are really a go-to one. Other ones you can get are made out of fiberglass. I don't have those today. But again, they'll last you probably longer than the plastic pots will. And again, they come in a whole bunch of different sizes. The prices on your plastic pots, ceramic pots, and your fiberglass ones are anywhere from inexpensive to, are you kidding? So bear that in mind when you go shopping. Other things you can use are your hanging baskets. This is a coir insert, and you can get these in window boxes and huge, huge ones and really small ones. These guys, this is what they look like when they're new. This is what mine looks like after about 3 years. Still got mud on the bottom. The only time I have really had them get really ratty is when the birds discovered them and wanted to use it for nesting material. And thanks, I'll share. I have no problem with that. And for some of your other hanging baskets, good old moss. If you've got a fairly tight weave on the basket and you've got access to moss, green side out, brown side on the inside, make it a good big fat layer. It really acts as an insulator, keeps the soil in, keeps the moisture in. This one is a felt, and they come in different sizes again. And this one's a little bit too small for this hanging basket, but you'll get the idea. You just pop it in and put your soil in. Again, it holds the moisture beautifully, doesn't allow the soil to all dribble out, and the plants really like it. So there's a couple of different options for you, a couple of different ideas. If you are really on a budget and you've got the frames, but you don't have the money to go out and buy the liners, if you've got old fabric, you can use burlap, you can use flour sacks, you can use old sheets or your kid's old flannel shirt. It doesn't really matter, because all you need is something that's going to not fall apart, hold the soil in, and especially with hanging baskets, your plants are probably going to be cascading over the sides and nobody's going to know what's in there either. So use what you've got, make the most of it, and have fun growing.